In a research study that made psychologists deeply uncomfortable, participants were brought in for a series of interviews. They were university students, normal people, no history of mental illness, no particular suggestibility. And stay over the course of several sessions, the researchers gently, persistently suggested that the participant had committed a crime in their teenage years. Assault, theft, something serious, something that had never happened. By the end of the study, roughly 70% of participants had developed a detailed, vivid, emotionally convincing memory of a crime they had never committed. They didn't just agree that it might have happened. They remembered it. They could describe it. They felt remorse about it. This was the work of psychologists Julia Shaw and Stephen Porter. And what it revealed about human memory should change the way you think about everything you're certain you remember. Because if a complete stranger can implant a false memory of a crime in your mind within a few weeks, what has a lifetime of retelling your own stories done to them? We tend to think of memory the way we think of a video file. Something happened, the brain recorded it, and when we need it, we press play. But that's not what memory is. That's never been what memory is. Memory is a reconstruction, every single time. In the 1930s, a British psychologist named Frederic Bartlett asked participants to read a Native American folktale called The War of the Ghosts. It was deliberately strange, full of unfamiliar imagery and logic. Then he asked them to retell it, immediately, and again weeks later. What he found was striking. Each time people retold the story, they didn't just forget details. They replaced them with things that made more sense to them, things that fit their own cultural logic, their own expectations, their own emotional needs. The story didn't degrade, it transformed. Bartlett concluded something that most of us still haven't fully absorbed. Memory is not retrieval, it is recreation. Every time you remember something, your brain is not opening a file. It is rebuilding the experience from available fragments, filling gaps with what seems plausible, with what fits the story you already believe, with what your current emotional state suggests must have been true. Which means that every act of remembering is also quietly an act of rewriting. Now here's where it gets personal. Think about a story you've told more than once. A difficult memory maybe. Something that happened in a relationship, or in your family, or at a moment that shaped you. Did you tell it the same way every time? To your best friend, and to your therapist, and to someone you just met at a dinner party? Of course not. You adjusted the emphasis. You left things out. You chose which details mattered. Not because you were lying, but because every audience pulls a slightly different story out of you. And here is what the research tells us happens next. The version you told becomes the memory. Elizabeth Loftus, the psychologist who has spent a lifetime studying false memory, demonstrated this in experiment after experiment. When people retell an experience, the act of retelling changes the original memory trace. The words you chose, the detail you emphasized, the reaction on the other person's face. All of it folds back into the memory itself. So the friend who listened with wide eyes and said, "That sounds terrible," made the memory more terrible. The person who laughed and said, "You always exaggerate," made you doubt whether it was as bad as you thought. Your audience doesn't just receive your memories. They co-author them. There's a particular category of memory that feels completely different from ordinary remembering. Psychologists call them flashbulb memories, the ones that feel photographed, frozen, certain. Where were you when you heard about something devastating? A disaster, a death, a moment that stopped the world? You probably remember it in vivid detail. the room you were in, who told you, what you were wearing, how the light looked. These memories feel like the most reliable ones we have, the most real. Psychologist Ulric Neisser studied this phenomenon after the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986. He asked students the day after to write down exactly where they were and how they heard the news. Then he asked them again, 2.5 years later. The accounts were dramatically different. Details had shifted, locations had changed, whole scenes had been replaced. But here was the part that stopped everyone. The participants were absolutely certain their later memories were correct. Some of them, when shown their own handwritten accounts from the day after, refused to believe they had written them. This is the cruelest trick memory plays on us. The more emotionally intense an experience was, the more certain we feel about our memory of it, and the more certain we feel, the less we question it, which means the memories we defend most fiercely in an argument, the ones we'd swear on, the ones that feel carved into us, are often the ones that have been rewritten the most. Think about the last time you and someone close to you remembered the same event differently. Not a small disagreement about details, a real difference, where you were certain it happened one way, and they were equally certain it happened another. Someone was cold when you needed warmth, or you said something that hurt them, and you have no memory of saying it at all. Or an evening that you remember as difficult, they remember as fine. The natural assumption is that one of you is wrong, or lying, or misremembering out of convenience. But what if you're both telling the truth? What if you were both there, and you still left with different experiences, encoded through different emotional states, then retold in different contexts to different people, then quietly reshaped by all of that over time? Memory researchers have documented this consistently. Two people who share an experience don't share a memory of it. They each build their own, from their own vantage point, their own history, their own needs in that moment. This doesn't mean accountability disappears. What happened, happened. But it does mean that the version of events you've been protecting with such certainty might be more constructed than you realize, and so might theirs. Harvard psychologist Daniel Schacter mapped what he called the 7 sins of memory, the systematic ways in which our recall is not just imperfect, but predictably, architecturally flawed. 3 of them are worth sitting with here. The first is what Schacter calls suggestibility, the way memory bends toward what we've been told, what we've read, what the people around us believe happened. It's why eyewitness testimony is so much less reliable than courts once assumed. And it's why the stories other people tell about your own childhood can quietly become part of how you remember it. The second is bias, the way our current feelings rewrite our past ones. When a relationship ends badly, we tend to remember the warning signs we ignored. When it ends well, we remember the early magic more vividly. Our present self edits the past to make the story feel coherent. And the third, perhaps the most quietly devastating, is what he calls misattribution. Remembering something correctly, but getting the source wrong. You're certain you were there, but maybe someone described it to you so vividly that the description became the memory. You're certain you felt a particular way in that moment, but maybe that's how you felt when you first told the story, years later. The memory is real. The feeling is real. The source has been lost somewhere in the retelling. None of this means that nothing is real, or that your experiences didn't happen, or that your pain is invalid because the details might have shifted. What it means is something more interesting than that. It means that the story you've been telling about what happened, about who did what, about how it felt, about what it means, is not a fixed object. It's alive. It's been changing all along. It will keep changing. The philosopher Epictetus said that people are not disturbed by events, but by the opinions they form about events. Memory research suggests something even deeper than that. We don't even have reliable access to the events themselves, only to the stories we've been building about them, layer by layer, ever since. There is something quietly liberating in that, if you let it be. If the memory has already been rewritten, by time, by retelling, by the people who listened and the moods you were in when you spoke, then you have more authorship over your past than you thought. Not to deny what happened, but to hold the story a little more lightly. To ask, is this still the version I want to carry? Because the past is not as fixed as it feels, and neither are you. If this opens something in you, share it with someone you've argued with about how something happened. And if you're new here, this is what we do on this channel. We ask the questions that nobody thought to teach us. I'll see you in the next one.